Hello, hello, hello. Uh, I hope that you can see and hear us. Please let us know in the chat that you do.
Hello.
We are seeing the first hellos. That's wonderful. Is the
Yeah.
quality okay?
Oh dear, so
Fantastic.
many
Okay.
hellos.
Before we begin properly, we still have a couple of minutes, and we thought we will begin a bit early so people can log in without any problems. There are hundreds of participants for this session. We are very excited about it, and perhaps to warm you up a little, we could begin by asking you to just tell us where you are watching us from. We can see Czech Republic already, Slovakia, Ukraine, another one from Czech Republic. Wow, it's moving fast. Moravia, okay, Russia,
Oh, Siberia.
Lithuania,
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Czech Republic,
Well, we
Ukraine.
have we have the whole region represented.
Yeah. And we also have Poland on your side and Germany on my side, so very international.
A very international afternoon.
Yeah. It's good. It's a good afternoon. Good afternoon.
And we have just topped 500. Believe you me, and we have the counter here on our control panel, and it's just amazing to see how numbers are picking like crazy.
550. I can see that.
Oh my
550.
goodness! Even as we speak. Okay, it's 4 o'clock officially. So I would like to formally and very warmly welcome you all on behalf of Macmillan Education. My name is Grzegorz Piewak. I am a head ELT consultant for Macmillan in the Central and Eastern European region, and I'm talking to you from Warsaw, Poland. Warsaw is very grim and drizzly today. Not the nicest of days after a real heat wave that we experienced over the past few days. Today is rather grim, but I am pretty sure that very soon it'll all brighten up. And this is, of course, thanks to our main speaker today, who is Gosia Mróz, who is, as you can see, smiling really nicely at you already from Germany.
From Germany, from Hamburg, yes.
From
Originally from
Hamburg.
Poland, but based in Hamburg at the moment. Yeah.
So, she's also started introducing herself, but I would just like to add on her behalf, since she's very modest, that she's a very, very experienced teacher of various age groups. Is that correct, Gosia?
Yeah, that's correct.
Various age groups, of which she loves teaching young learners. And in this capacity, she is with us today with, as I already started saying, a lot of background teaching various sorts of groups in various environments. She worked in Poland for quite a long time and recently relocated to Hamburg, Germany, where she took up a teaching position. So we are very happy at Macmillan to have Gosia as a very valuable member of our teacher training team. She's also part of this enthusiastic group of teacher trainers centered around the needs of young learners, kindergarten, lower primary, upper primary as well. And she's a returning teacher trainer as well for this area of interest. She did sessions for our region several times already, and she will be doing more. But today she's launching a whole series of webinars under a joint heading Plan Your Lessons Like a Star. So it's not just a one-off. She will be back with three more sessions over the next couple of months. So please be on the lookout. Wherever you are, we will be sending you information on subsequent events within the series. So I hope, when we finish around mid-April, you will have had a really solid introduction to Gosia's thinking about what it takes these days to really plan your lessons with younger learners like a star. And being a very experienced audience, you will no doubt have noticed a little soft reference to one of our flagship titles for this sector, Academy Stars. We are very proud and excited about this course series. We think it's one of the most well thought out and beautifully executed courses for those sorts of learners. So I hope that you will have a lot of joy looking at how Gosia is anchoring her methodology in this particular publication. I know that there will be a lot of references to the course, and I hope that through this she will make her methodology a lot more accessible, simply because you will see very clearly, I hope, how you can use this methodology on a daily basis. For instance, drawing on a wonderful set of resources such as those offered by Academy Stars series. So that's really all from me. I will be back at the very end with a couple of announcements, but for now, I'm just going to hand over to Gosia, and I'm leaving you in very capable and enthusiastic hands, as you will see.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gregor. So many nice words. I think I might have blushed a little bit, but maybe you don't see it. I don't know. If it happened, well, not much I can do about it. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much, all of you, for coming. And I'm sure that some of you I have met personally. I'm sure of that. And I really wish we can also, one day meet personally as well. But for now, this is what we have. We have to get used to this online environment, but that also allows us to meet in such a huge group, such an international group, and I'm more than happy. So hello everyone, and let's kick off. We have almost 800 people. That's so, yeah.
Gosia, if I could just butt in for the final time, I promise. Sure. One thing I forgot to mention is that we also have in the chat several colleagues from our various offices in the countries from which you're watching us now. So if you have any questions relating to anything customer related, getting access to our courses, any such issues, you are more than welcome to ask these questions in the chat, and I'm sure our colleagues will be more than happy to assist and answer those questions as we go along. That's really all from me, Gosia, and the floor is really yours.
All right, feel free to contribute anytime. Okay, so let's kick off then. Yeah, so, and also I just wanted to say that I might be asking some questions, and I'd be very grateful if you could, answer them in the chat window if you feel like, and if you have some ideas, because I believe there's nothing more inspiring than a big group of teachers from various countries, various contests, and big cities and smaller cities, and we have so much to share. So let's take advantage of this time spent together, and let's share as much as we can. I'd like to start with something that doesn't happen to me very often, but it used to happen to me quite a lot. I am starting a lesson with my students, my young learners. And of course, before the lesson, I have to prepare it. So I open the book, and this is what I see. And very often when we do it, the next thing that happens, very often, sometimes, it depends, right? But it sometimes happens to us that we see this book, we see that we're going to be discussing grammar, we've got lesson 2, and we look at it, and we think, okay, so this is what I'm going to do today. I've got 45 minutes for that. I assume that usually lessons take about 45 minutes, right? Sometimes longer, sometimes they're a bit shorter, but let's agree on this unit. And my first question is like, how do I start? And then I start asking myself some other questions. Should I kick off with explaining grammar? Because it's grammar lesson, but there's also some story. I can see some reading and listening comprehension. So how's grammar here? And then maybe since it's grammar, and I know that part of my course is graphic grammar, maybe I should start with graphic grammar. But would it really work here? Because I know there is another section in the book for graphic grammar, but maybe I should introduce it earlier. And then do I really have time for everything? Or maybe I have too much time. I don't know, because it's only one short story and only one short two tasks. And this all tends to be really confusing. We open people's book, and we sometimes don't know what to do, and we are a little bit lost. And I don't know if it happens to you sometimes. I believe it happens to everyone. Sometimes more, sometimes less often, but I believe that we all either occasionally go through this or have been, in this place. Or if you haven't been, you maybe will be one day. You never know. So normally in situations like that, to my experience, when we have so many questions and they're a little bit chaotic and we're not sure what to do and how to approach this, what we sometimes tend to do, and I sometimes did that too, and as I said, I think it happens to everyone, we start to panic. And I am wondering if you are familiar with this feeling of panicking when you don't have that much time to plan the lesson, or you have too much time to plan the lesson, but you still spend half an hour just gazing at the book and go like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? I don't know. And then you drink one cup of, one coffee after another. And usually when we start to panic, we start rushing. And I think it happens not only with teaching, but basically anytime people start to panic, maybe it's just, the biology. So we are supposed to teach one lesson, and lesson 2, grammar time, but it takes me, 10 minutes to do it because it's a short story, it's a short task, maybe 15. I still have half an hour left. So I jump to the next lesson because it's also grammar. So it's kind of similar. So maybe we've done this, so let's just carry on. And then I do all the things in lesson 3 because, again, I show graphic grammar and we answer some questions. We have a small role play. I still have 15 minutes to go. So maybe I'll just go to, the activity book, and maybe we can do some exercises there. And what happens is me covering so much material and my students looking a little bit like this cat in the picture, which has this, what written on its face. And I strongly believe that this is, I actually know that this is something that can be avoided. And when we avoid these situations, we have everything under control, and it makes us feel so much better. I'm gonna explain it in a moment, because the book that we start with, this is people's book. And there is also another thing which comes with our course, which is the teacher's book. And at the beginning of my teaching career, I used to ignore teacher's book because it was, there was a lot of text, and I thought that, well, I've got the course book, so it's enough if I just open it and go with the flow. But teacher's book is called teacher's book for a reason, right? There is a reason to that. And there are many very wise and competent people who spent a lot of time doing many things that we don't have to do now because they have been done by them. And we can benefit from their knowledge, but also from some plans and some activities they have already thought of and prepared. And also, adjusted to the book we're using with our students. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about some key principles of planning lessons and how to tackle it and how to approach it. But as Grzegorz has already mentioned, this is just the first out of 4 webinars in total, and we're going to have a look at some other things in detail in the upcoming webinars, to which I invite you, obviously. So speaking about lesson planning, I think it's always good to start with understanding why we do certain things. And I have divided this part into 3 sections. So how we can benefit from writing a lesson plan before the lesson, during the lesson, but also after the lesson. So I'm going to walk you through this process so you can understand my approach to it a little bit better. First of all, one of the main benefits of writing a good lesson plan before the lesson is that it gives you enough time to plan 3 crucial things regarding your lessons, which is what I want my students to learn, because eventually that's, like, after all, that's why I'm in the classroom. I want to teach my students. I want them to learn something. Also, how am I going to achieve that? Because sometimes we know what we want to teach and we know what we want the outcome to be, but we also have to think of how, because there are so many factors that we have to take into consideration. And also, it's very important to know and to think about how am I going to get the proof, that my students have learned what I wanted them to learn. So what they should learn, how they will learn it, and how will I make sure that they have learned it. Another big benefit of writing a lesson plan before the lesson, the actual lesson, is that it allows you to plan certain amount of time for certain activities. So therefore, depending on how big your group is and how much time you have for the lesson, and also, I don't know, maybe you have some other things planned, maybe you have a test planned, or maybe you teach after the lunch break, so your students tend to run a little bit late, or they, I don't know, need to leave earlier. It allows you to take all of these things into consideration and to be ready for these situations. And another thing which I find extremely important, especially because I used to be a very shy teacher and I didn't used to be very confident in my classroom. That has changed, but it took me some time to learn it and to sort of train it. Is that when your lesson plan is well prepared and when you have taken everything into consideration, when you have thought about everything that you need in your lesson, there is not much space left for unexpected incidents. I mean, don't get me wrong, they might happen. It happened to me once that a clock fell off the wall and it broke. It was a glass clock, and this is something that you can't really plan, right? And if you're as clumsy as me, it might happen to you more often than not. But jokes aside, this really makes you, I believe it makes you a more confident teacher because you're simply prepared. And you're prepared for any events that might happen, especially those that happen more often than we would sometimes want to. Therefore, you have more confidence in your lessons. Now, another benefit of writing a lesson plan, and now we're going to switch to during the lesson. So when we are already in the classroom and the lesson is happening, is that if you plan your lesson well, and if you adjust the tasks well, if you choose them wisely, and if you combine them in a way that best serves you, it gives you a lot of flexibility. And in case something happens that you haven't predicted, because again, you never know, sometimes, I don't know, a big storm comes or something, it gives you some space for flexibility. So you know how to, you know which tasks you really need to do and which you can skip. You can omit certain things that you have planned, but maybe they're not as necessary as some other things. Now we're going to talk about it in more detail in one of the upcoming webinars. But this is something that I think we should already have in our minds while discussing some further parts today. And also another thing is that you can easily keep track of what has been done already. And because if you have a physical plan, like a piece of paper, a document, or whatever, however you write it, or even your teacher's book where you can make notes, you can just tick things that have been done already. And then, for example, if you want to work some more revision, you go to your teacher's book, you see the lessons you've done already, and you see that there are still some activities that fit well to this and that topic, but we haven't done them, so maybe I can do them when, I don't know, when we finish the unit and I want to have this big revision. So it's very easy to monitor it and to have it under control. But also, there are also many benefits of lesson planning that come after the lesson. First of all, when you plan your lesson and then you give this lesson, you observe your students and you observe how they react to certain activities, to the way you present grammar maybe, or to the way you teach vocab, whether they like flashcards or maybe they don't, and so on and so forth. So while observing your students, you get immediate feedback on what works and what doesn't work. Therefore, you can simply, in your, again, physical lesson plan, you can, put ticks next to things that are great, and you see that your students are so engaged and so enthusiastic, and put a small cross or maybe like a sad smiley face, a sad one, right? Emoji, sad emoji, next to things that didn't really work out for some reasons, maybe because they were too complicated, maybe too complex tasks, or maybe just because they were too elaborate, or maybe because your students are not very good at cooperating and group work, and maybe you should avoid such tasks in the future. So after the lesson, you can, when you have a moment and it really doesn't require much time, you just sit, you look at it, you reflect on your lesson, and you note things down just by putting small symbols. So you know that if something doesn't work with this class, you just don't do it anymore, and problem solved. And the last benefit I'd like to mention here is that also something very practical and something that I find extremely useful is that when you have a physical lesson plan, and it happens sometimes that we get sick, or sometimes we have to substitute for another teacher, we have to replace them in their lesson, you take these physical plans and you have a physical trace of what materials have been covered, which is also very helpful when sometimes you have some parents visiting, and some parents are really, engaged in the process of their the education of their children, and they want to know, and they're very inquisitive. Sometimes the school principal would like to have a look at it. Sometimes you want to brainstorm some things with fellow teachers. Sometimes you want, a teacher goes on a maternity leave, and you take over the class and you can see what has been done. So everything is well organized. I think it's very pragmatic, and I think it's very useful. I believe it's very useful. So having discussed these benefits, you might think, well, okay, so it's good to plan a lesson. I have this book. I have my teacher's book. I know why this is useful for me. So why can't I simply use my teacher's book? I don't know. Maybe you know. I do know. I'm going to tell you in a moment, but I'm building suspense. I have three possible answers to this question. And the first one is simply because there's so much more. Now, I believe that the teacher's book is a great source of activities. It shows us how to work with the books that our students have, and also like with all the course components and everything. But it's limited still to, it's sort of like these collection of guidelines, right? And also some very specific activities. But I am sure that each and every one of you has some favorite activities, some favorite games. Maybe these are games that are popular in your country, and some games that you will not find in the teacher's book, but you do know that they work with your students. Or maybe you cooperate with other teachers, you do some cross-curricular activities, and you cooperate with a science teacher, and you want to do some project together. Now, this you will not find in the teacher's book, because teacher's book is supposed to serve all the teachers. So, of course, there's so much more to it. Another thing is that every class you teach is different. And I am sure that you're fully aware of that. And some things that you find in the teacher's book will work for one class, but will not work for another. And sometimes you have 30 students in your class, and sometimes you've got 3 students in your class. We teach groups of different sizes. And one of you, I've just noticed in the chat window, one of you has mentioned that the teacher's book is a little bit too general. And I believe it is quite general because it has to fit so many needs of so many teachers. It has to be general. It cannot be too specific because it's used by teachers. Like here in this webinar, we have at least like 6 different countries, So I think that's the reason for that. Now, the last answer I have for this question, why not just sticking to the teacher's book, is because I believe that eventually, after all, in the lesson, we are in charge. And I do believe that the teacher's book is general guidelines with some specific activities, suggestions, ideas, and a lot of methodology, a lot of tips, but eventually you're the one who chooses. It's just like, when you bake the cake, you choose how to decorate it, right? So, like you take the recipe, you take the measurements, how many, grams of flour and how much water and how much oil and so on. But eventually you're the one who decides what the shape of the form in which you're going to bake it is, and whether you're going to put chocolate icing or, I don't know, whatever, toffee icing on it and decorate it with something or not. So I believe that this metaphor works well with lesson planning. You're in charge, you choose, you know your students best, and you always have to somehow personalize what you do with your students. And I can see so many of you writing agree, and I'm so happy to hear it, because I believe that we share so many opinions, because we also share experience somehow. So the first thing I always do when I start a new course, and I also sometimes do it throughout the course because we tend to fall into these patterns and we sometimes forget, is checking my options. I want to make sure that I know what options I have. And to do this, I normally take the teacher's book in which everything is written and all the extra materials are also mentioned. I check my online resources. I assume you have the access to them, and I check if I have some online flashcards. Maybe I have some drag and drop activities online. But I start with a teacher's book, with a physical book. I just open it, and sometimes it is quite consuming, and I'm not going to lie to you, but I still believe that, assuming that we're going to teach one class for a year, it's worth spending even a full day reading this, especially the intro to the teacher's book thoroughly, because that can save us so much time later on, and it gives us so much information that we really need to understand how the course is structured. And speaking about that, first of all, you can check out scope and sequence, which tells you what you're going to do, what you will have done by the end of the year. It has the answer key, which I don't know about you, but I use it all the time because someone has written down all the answers. So why would I do the job again? It's been done already. Also, as I've mentioned before, all the components of the course are listed. Let's just quickly jump through it. You have the structure of the people's book, but also of the workbook, so you understand why certain tasks look like that. You see the patterns, you see that each and every chapter is structured in the same way, so you can figure out how to approach it in your class. There are many symbols in books, and these symbols in people's books are supposed to serve the students too. So you need to understand them in order to explain them to your students so they can benefit from this knowledge. And you have a lot of warmers and also coolers, all of these activities, game bank, which is like, there are so many games there, but you can also add your own games on post-it cards or however you want. And also there's a lot of methodology, which I also like, that these, tips for teachers, and it might take you the whole day to sort of get a hang of it, but trust me, it's worth it. So I would like you now to think about some activities or maybe some stages of the lesson, or some, I call them rituals, that you have with your students that you just can't imagine your lesson without. Something that you always like to have as a part of your lesson. And we have warmers, songs. All right, I'll wait for a moment for your ideas. Lead and games, Fun, that's very important, especially with young learners, right? But also for us teachers, we need to have fun too, Checking homework, that's a very good point too. Some teachers don't always do it. Some people feel they need to because students need maybe a little bit more guidance, feedback, games, conclusions, so some sort of this wrap-up stage, flash, so TPR activities. You see, so many things that we always want to have in our lessons. Now, I have chosen 5, let's call them components, without which I cannot really imagine my lessons. And the first one is revision. I always have the revision stage, and I believe it's absolutely crucial. And also, before this webinar, we have collected some questions from you and from many teachers. So you, right? And some of you mentioned that some students have problems remembering some vocab that we have already discussed in the lesson and so on and so forth. And that's why I think revision is crucial, and I always do it. I cannot imagine my lesson without it. Also, introducing the context of the lesson. This is, to me, again, one of the most important things. So when I teach, let's say, present simple, I teach present simple and let's say everyday activities. So my students, I sort of code in their heads that in this context, they're very likely to use these structures. And it's only natural for them. And that's why it makes them feel safer. And it's sort of like the lesson is a whole, right? So I believe it's absolutely crucial, and it doesn't have to take much time, and it's basically done by the book itself. Because every unit is, there's this one leitmotif of every unit, which is our context. But still, even if I decide to do some extra lessons, and instead of covering this material, like, one lesson in the book, I decide to do just one activity, one exercise, and then build up on it. I still want to make sure that I stick to the context, so my students are not confused. Controlled practice and accuracy. I think it's important because these are all these tasks that help our students prepare to exams in which accuracy is checked. And of course, you might think, well, my students are 6 or 7 years old and like the exams are 5 years ahead of them, but eventually they will sit them, and we do have to work on their accuracy. Maybe I don't pay that much attention to it at the very beginning, but it is there. Right? So, because I don't want to teach my students things that are not accurate, right? So it's pretty obvious, isn't it? But an even more important stage is fluency or free practice, especially at the beginning. We want our kids to talk. We don't want them to sit and be able to solve tasks, because eventually they learn the language to use it as a tool to communicate with other people, with the world, by interacting, by also reading, by, doing research and all these fascinating things that are still ahead of them. Many of you mentioned wrap-up, summary. Yes, absolutely. I think just like when you start with revision and activating schemata, I strongly believe that you should finish sort of like with this wrap-up. So the students, when they leave the classroom, they have this sense of completing something. And they don't have this feeling that some things are left unsaid, some things are left undone. I believe it's very, very important. And finally, I did put TPR here. And many of you mentioned TPR, and also many of you mentioned games, songs. I treat all of these things as TPR, because songs very often, we don't just sit, and sing. We also move, dance, and we show with our hands. Same with games. So TPR is sort of this umbrella term here for many of these things that you have mentioned. And very often it happens very often that one activity serves more than one function. So you can have a revision activity that would also include a lot of TPR, or you can have, activating like this activity that activates schemata, but at the same time helps your student practice fluency. So let's play a little game, because we work with kids, so we like games, don't we? And round one, I'm going to show you some activities from the teacher's book from Academy Stars. And I would like us to think which of these 5 things I have just mentioned are also part of this activity. Okay, and mind you, I have mentioned 5 things that I believe are really important, the most important. But of course, there are many other things that you might like put as one of the stages of your lesson. There are so many things that can happen in one lesson. I believe these mentioned are the most important, and they make the very core of the lesson. And the rest are some additional things that we are, of course, free to implement. Anyway, round 1. So, what's the last word? Play the what's the last word from the game bank, and you play it with the audio from lesson 2, activity 1, and pause the audio after some of the key words: street, flat, gymnastics, tennis, grandma, Saturday. So, which of these six components can you see in this activity? What can we... Revision, definitely. Also the name, warm-up, right? So warm-up, revision, anything else? Except for controlled practice. Something happens. I'm sorry, something happened with my slides. Okay, yeah, they're fine. Controlled practice, maybe not yet, because it's just the beginning. And controlled practice is normally what you do after you have introduced some new topic, or after you have sort of introduced the context. So I'll do it a little bit later, maybe. But yes, revision, warm-up, TPR also, absolutely. So revision for sure. We also activate schemata and the context here, because normally warm-up games are the very first step to introduce the new topic, combining it with the revision. And there's a lot of TPR here. If you don't maybe see it in the task when you read it, it's something that comes naturally. So if you pause the audio after some of the key words and you ask your students to say what the word was, at the same time you can ask them to stand up and clap their hands, or jump, or spin around, like so many things. So I see a big TPR potential here. Okay, round 2. So we've got 2 activities here, order and write. So we have some sentences with gaps. We need to our students, we have them complete them, and then we also have some words in which we put them in the table divided into adjective. It's got, so basically we categorize some words. So what have we got here? Now here we do have, as some of you have mentioned already, revision, yes, but also controlled practice here. So here, this is a good moment to check accuracy and to control our students a little bit more. And if we spot some mistakes, we can correct them. This is the stage. And we don't really practice fluency here, right? Not yet. This is when we focus on the accuracy. Just keep repeating this word, but that's sort of what is happening here. But also revision, because with, as you can see, with task 2, we've got new, amazing, big, great, games, music, watch cartoons, read books, and then we've got opinions. So you can guess from what's written here that it's not just, a target language from one lesson. You can see that there are many words here. So it's probably also some other previous lessons. So also revision. And revision is something that doesn't necessarily happen at the beginning of the lesson. It does too, but it also happens throughout the lesson. So it happens all the time. We drill things, right? Okay, let's play one more round. So here, a student chooses a toy or a gadget that they want to write about. So they're going to be writing about something. And they're supposed to write a paragraph. And then first they write the draft version, then they write it again using their best handwriting, and they draw pictures, and then they check their work. And yeah, I can already see so many free practice. Yes, this is free practice, and I'm so happy to also to see that some of you write fluency. I put it in one stage, but very often people people who are not teachers, probably, they, parents maybe, they don't realize that writing is also practicing fluency, and fluency is not only speaking. So here we definitely practice fluency. We wrap up, our lesson, because we finish with a final product, and then we have some space for peer feedback here. And but what we practice here is fluency in writing. Right. And of course, we can add some fluency practice in speaking, because then our students can swap papers and give each other feedback. So why not? All right. Well done. Thank you very much. You're doing fine. You're doing just great. So let's carry on. I hope you're still with me. And thank you for being so enthusiastic and so engaged and helping me out. Now, we already know what the components of our course are. We know the teacher's book quite well. We have read it, we have checked it out, and we have checked what different resources we have. And we have already decided on some lesson ingredients that we like to have in our lessons to keep them structured and to make sure that they're valuable to our students, and we can benefit from them as teachers. Self-development, I guess, professional development, but our students also benefit from them, and they learn, and there is a lot of learning going on. So let's now think how to glue these things together, because I think that on this stage, we have a lot of things. We want to have all of them in our lessons. We want to think about all of them, but how to do it? It's almost, again, I'm going to get back to this cake baking metaphor. Like, you've got all the ingredients and you've read the recipe, and now you have to start and you don't know where. So my first comment here is think big. And this is quite a catchy phrase, and it's used everywhere. What I mean by it in the context of lesson planning is that every time I teach, I don't only think about the next lesson. I think about next lessons, but also previous lessons. I see learning process, and I see working with my students as a long line, and some of it I have already walked, and some of it is still ahead of me, and I am in this place, and this place where I'm standing is my lesson on Friday at 3 p.m., but there are also some upcoming lessons. And this is when scope and sequence comes in handy. You open your teacher's book and you see that in Unit 5, Sun and Snow, we're going to talk about the weather, natural features. You're going to talk about present continuous, affirmative and negative, but also questions. You already know it. And you already see that there's going to be a play. There's going to be reading, which is a play, and the children will learn to find information in the text and listen for key information, talk about the weather. There will be a scene for a play, and also there will be some pronunciation, and I can see what sounds. So even before the first lesson of this unit, I already know what's going to happen. Therefore, I can prepare my students to these more and more difficult tasks, because we start with teaching some words, and then we build on it, and we introduce some grammar using these words, and so on. So I very often, when I plan, I take at least 2 units, and I think at least 2 units ahead. Sometimes I think the semester ahead, but to be honest, it is quite time consuming, and to plan the whole semester, not to mention the whole year, but normally I plan in semesters, I need a whole day, sometimes a couple of days. It's not that I sit 12 hours a day, no, but I need some mental space for that, and sometimes I need a break. So yes, it is time consuming, and again, I'm not going to lie to you, but I think it's already enough to think about 1 unit only. It's already a lot. It's more than many people do, and you'll see how much it helps you. So before the first lesson of the unit, what I do is I take my pupil's book, so the one that your students use, I open it and I go page by page, and I look at things I'm going to be teaching. So I know, and I'm sometimes only in my mind, sometimes on a piece of paper, I make some very short notes without getting into details. So lesson 1 is going to be vocab, picture telling, song. And then I've got lesson 2, which is going to be, so grammar. So I've got vocab, then I'm going to have grammar, and then there's a story. And I'll have to check if my students understand. So this is the task they're going to do. And then we have grammar. So grammar is going to be 2 lessons, lesson 2 and lesson 3. And I've got graphic grammar. So I have to check it out now, because maybe I can use it in my first grammar lesson. And there's a lot of restricted practice here. Maybe I could stretch it. Maybe I can do more restricted practice in the previous lesson too. And eventually there's also this reading part, Lost in the Snow. So there's reading for gist and detail, but also recognizing the genre. Like, so you see, like what I'm doing, I'm just going through all these pages one after another to get the general idea of what's going to be taught in my upcoming lessons. Right? And I'm prepared. I already know that there will be a project, and it's also related to the weather, because this is the context of our unit, therefore the context of our lessons. So how is that, like planning the whole unit instead of just one lesson, beneficial? I've already mentioned some benefits of that, and I think the word benefit is like the very sponsor of this, this session. First of all, it helps you design long-term learning goals. So not only the goals, the aims for the upcoming lesson, but for the whole unit. So I know that if in lesson 1, I'm supposed to teach vocab, and I am then in lesson 3, and I see this vocab still hasn't really clicked with my students, I know that I need to put some more, give it some more attention. Therefore, because my long-term goal is for my students to be able to recognize these words, but also use them actively, because I want them to have this active, not only passive knowledge. So that's the first thing, long-term goals. And if you go even further, you know what you have at the beginning of the year, of the semester. Let's talk semesters, at the semester, and you know what you want to have at the end of it. So then when you have meetings with some parents, you can say, okay, this year we're going to do this and that. You can also tell your students, look, you started not knowing this, and now 3 months into learning, you already know so much. And sometimes students need it. Sometimes it's good to say these things out loud. It helps you spot target language in other activities, because if you teach words related to the weather, then you jump to lesson 4, I believe, which is reading, and you can see these words in the text, which helps you use the reading lesson to practice some vocab, for restricted practice for vocabulary lesson. Because why not? I mean, of course, you don't have to do it, but you can. And if you have very strong students and you want to challenge them, you know where to find some materials, and you don't have to sit at your computer and write, handouts, because you have this already in your book. You have it in these additional materials that you know about from your teacher's book. And also, it helps you manage timing better. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about timing later, but I believe timing and planning timing is key to a successful lesson. And because then you have everything under control, and you're very, very flexible with it. Because you see that if you plan 6, like this activity should take 6 minutes and it takes 10, then in the next lesson, you already know that it's going to take more, so you can plan better. So you can manage this timing better. And I'm going to talk about it in a moment, just like in 2 minutes, because what I want to show you first is something that I do, and I also have some good news for you. This is also a handout that you're going to get after this webinar. So you will get a set of handouts, actually. And one of them is sample unit planner with an empty unit planner, so you can use it to plan your lessons. And I thought that we thought at Macmillan that maybe this is something that you can find useful. So not only do you listen about these things, but you can actually give it a try, and you can check it out and see if it works for you. So this is something I always do with all, and also teach adults and teenagers, and I do it with like everyone I teach, be it group classes, one-to-one classes. I look, I sort of like, I think about the future. So this is taken from Academy Stars, which is the book that you're familiar with. As you see, I use examples from Academy Stars because I simply love this book, and I think it's a great course, one of the best I've ever worked with. So in each unit, I have about 10 lessons, right? Plus sometimes you've got some extra revision and so on. So as you can see, like this is not very detailed. This is just general information. And for each lesson, I write the aims of it, grammar, because sometimes you see you have a lesson, let's say lesson 7, listening. This is the listening lesson and speaking lesson, but there is present continuous to talk about the weather. So it's not, you see, grammar does not only happen in grammar lessons, it also happens in other lessons, and it's good to know that, right? Because maybe when in lesson 2 and 3 you introduce present continuous positive and negative sentences, and then you won't introduce questions, and you go, but why there are no questions here? We need them to speak. You see that actually you're going to have present continuous questions in lesson 6. So you already know it, right? And you don't rush with the material, and you don't add unnecessary things, because you can see that they're going to happen later and they have already been planned into this unit. And then also vocab. And I very often color code, and sometimes I do it on my computer. Sometimes I just use colorful pens because I like it. I like crafts. So with some colors, with my target vocab, I use, I don't know, let's say here, black color. But there's also some extra vocab that for which I use different colors, and I write it here because then I know that if these things occur in my lesson, I know that the pink things, so clothes, basic verbs, and genres, I can ignore. If my students are good, of course, I do want to challenge them, so I do introduce more vocab. But if my students struggle a little bit, it keeps reminding me that my target vocab here is cloud, rain, snow, wind, beach, mountain, sea, and then weather and clothes. Oh no, sorry, and then word formation adjectives. This is my target vocab, and the rest is just additional. I can teach it, I can read it, I don't have to. And then I also write about skills. So I know that my students will learn to categorize. So I also know it for future units that they have already learned it. So maybe I can, like 2 units later, I can also play with categorizing. Reading, fluency, speaking, writing. I know these skills, so I can also balance them out well. Right? Because at some point you might see that maybe there's a little bit too much reading. Maybe you need to practice fluency a little bit more because this is what your students struggle with. You see it here. And finally, I like to note down some activities and other, sometimes I call it comments. So I know there will be a song and a chant at the same time, lesson 1, lesson 5. I know there will be some CLIL, which I love, so I'm very excited about that. And I know that my students will also act out some dialogue, so I can think about how to put them in pairs and so on. And we will be talking about values and so on and so forth. So then when I look at it, I make some comments, sometimes on Post-it cards, sometimes with a pencil. For example, let's have a look at some examples of it. Of course, there are many more that you normally do. Lesson 2, we got present continuous, and we've got clothes. And clothes, this is additional vocab. It's not my target vocab here. But I'm thinking, okay, since it's gonna appear during the lesson in the warm-up stage, I'm actually gonna revise some vocab related to clothes because my students already know some. So I'm not gonna focus too much on that. I'm just gonna make it a part of my warm-up activity. So I take the best of both worlds, so to speak. And then lesson 4, there's grammar in context, reading, and also genres. In this lesson, the students, they have the text and they have to recognize the genre. And I think, okay, so the task here is for my students to guess that this is a play, but maybe I could bring a book of poetry and also maybe a novel, so my students can open these books and they can see, like, when they open the book of poetry, they see that poems look different to plays and to novels. So I already see it here before I even teach the first lesson, and we're talking about lesson 4 now. So I know I can do it, so I can bring the books. I don't have to do it. It's entirely up to me, and it depends on how lessons go. But it's an option that I already have somewhere, bookmark in my head. I see that there's CLIL, geography specifically, and we're going to be talking about some countries and children in different countries. So maybe I could bring this globe because it's cool, right? We talk about some countries. I want to show my students where they are because it's just interesting, and it also helps them, establish this context, and it helps them sort of feel for the characters they're going to be reading about, and it normally makes them fascinated, makes them so much more interested in the lesson we're teaching. If you teach online, maybe I should have a look at Google Maps. Maybe I'll find something interesting on Google Maps or like any other online maps, or maybe I can take screenshots, or maybe I can find these empty maps and try to guess which country is which, so here again, lesson 2, lesson 6, I think about it before lesson 1. And then in lesson 10, there was a project. We're going to be making anemometer, which is this thing that spins around when the wind blows, to show us the strength of the wind. So I know that for this, I need, because I see it in my book and I also see it in my teacher's book, I know that I need some empty cups and I need some straws and maybe a wire or something, maybe a piece of wire or something like that. I know that this is because I also do believe in recycling. I normally ask my students to bring things. I don't buy things because we can use some old plastic cups we have at home. So I should probably start collecting them 2 weeks prior to the lesson, because if I tell them after lesson 9, please bring this and that, it's never going to happen. Like, someone's going to forget. And this gives me enough time to be prepared. Again, you see anticipated problems, to be prepared for the lesson. And because I'm sure, like, if I say it in lesson, let's say 6 or 7, I still, if my students, they keep forgetting to bring things, I still have some time to collect them on my own. And also, I have this writing lesson, and I know that one class that I teach, they struggle with writing. They really have problems with that, and they need a lot of time for that. So I think I need 2 lessons for that. Maybe for those of you whose students' native alphabet is different and you use Cyrillic, this can be a little bit more time consuming because they will have to write using the Latin alphabet, and they might write slowly because it's so challenging for them. So obviously they need more time. I can't imagine them, not needing more time. But I also know that the very same class is very talkative. They're really fluent and they love talking. They're not shy. I'm very lucky. I don't have any shy students in this class. So maybe instead of spending the whole lesson on practicing fluency, maybe I could just cut this lesson in half and spend and devote the second half of this lesson to writing, because as you remember, I need more time for writing. I don't need that much time. I need less time for fluency because they're already really good at it, and I want to keep doing that, but maybe there are other things that would be more beneficial. And just so you know, it's not like I sit and I read one page of the book after another and then I just, think about everything and I come up with some ideas. All of these things are taken from the teacher's book. So you see the loop here, right? Someone has done it before. Some people much wiser than me have spent a lot of time preparing it and have done great job. And I just take what's given and it's already there. So you can see that this is a fragment of the teacher's book. Okay, so we already have course components. We have the teacher's book. We've read it and we've looked at it. We have lesson ingredients and we have already planned our unit, like long term. We already know what's going to happen. So now the last thing that we have to think about is the lesson, so finally planning the lesson. And in every lesson normally I start with some very small plan, like a sketch of the lesson, or sometimes I don't even write it down. I have it somewhere in the back of my head. So I definitely need my aims, and I already know I can find them in the teacher's book or my unit planner. I want to think about the materials that I need and the materials I have for this lesson. I always think about the ingredients that I want to keep. So I want to have this revision, clear context, and wrap up. And also I do want to, but I'm not going to focus on, let's say, restricted practice. So I didn't write these because these are more flexible. But these revision, clear context, wrap up, I definitely need them in my lesson. And then I also have a look at some activities and the choice I have. So I'm going to adjust them to my needs and my students' needs. So this is what happens in my head when I open the book, and mostly when I open my unit planner, and when I sit down to plan one specific lesson, my next lesson. So this is the lesson I'm going to show you. It's grammar time from Academy Stars, and we're going to be teaching some grammar. So I have one page in my People's book, and I also have some materials in the teacher's book. And I start with the aims, as I said before. So my aims here is for my students to understand the use of imperatives, read and act out a story using the target grammar. So you see, understand, and also read and act out the story in which this target grammar can be found. Okay, so basically imperatives. This is what I'm teaching. This is the aim of my lesson. Materials that I have once again People's book, and I'm thinking about material that my students are going to use. And I also have my workbook, and there are many activities in my workbook. I'm going to use this one because this one, I think it fits well, and I don't need more because that'd be maybe too much. And I have the revision stage of my lesson, and as you can see in this story, it happens in the street. So in the previous lesson, we talked about some means of transportation, but also some vehicles and basically transport. So I want to start with a revision. So I do the easiest thing in the world. I just open my game bank and I find a game that could be cool for this. Or I take the warm-up activity from my teacher's book from this particular lesson, sing a song, so play the song Traffic Jam again. This is the song we've already sung in the previous lesson. And ask students to join in and do the actions. Maybe I'll also ask them to point to, maybe I can ask them to point to, flashcards or whatever you choose to use in your lesson. And then I know that I want to set the context clearly. So, and the context is again transport. So I see what my teacher's book has to offer, and normally the context in lesson 2 is set by looking at the story and asking some questions about the story. Right. So, but you might have noticed that we've already set the context partly in the warm-up activity because it's also transport. I also know that my students need a little bit longer revision. So I'm going to ask them some more questions. The teacher's book gives me a couple of questions. I am going to come up with some more questions because I know my students. This is this moment when I use my teacher's book as guidelines, collection of guidelines, but I also add something because I know my students. Then I have some TPR to check comprehension. So again, I choose an activity from my teacher's book, play the audio one more time, have the children do the actions to the story, for the story with appropriate actions for the affirmative imperatives and a negative gesture for the negative imperative. So this is my TPR, but as you can see, this is also practicing sort of like free practice, receptive skills for sure, right? And also checking comprehension while having a TPR activity. And then the lesson, the next, there's one more thing, because it might be quite easy for my students. Maybe it takes less time than expected. So I think about possible extensions here, right? So you see, like I go step by step in my lesson, and you see what I'm going to be doing. And then I have restricted practice. This is good time because I've revised vocab, I've set the context, we've done some TPR, so there's a lot of energy, the level of energy is high. So now time for restricted practice. And this is when I'm going to use my workbook because I need that. Normally my students need a little bit more practice. So sometimes I use workbook only for homework. Sometimes I use it in my lesson because I know that some students need it. And finally, I have free practice. So I want my students to use target grammar. And I have two activities to choose from. And I have this sort of like main activity, but also there is the extension. I choose the extension activity because I just think that my students are going to like it much more than the original one. And they both come from the teacher's book, by the way. I did not write this. Someone else did. And then I have this wrap-up stage. For wrap-up stage, I can either use the activity that I haven't used in the previous stage. Why not? Or I can use this cooler activity. I really like cooler activities because I really need my lessons to sort of like finish, as a to be complete. But also I know that my students love Simon Says, so maybe I'm going to play Simon Says with them. And I might not, for one of these activities, you need to play the audio. I might not have time for that. So maybe I'll just read out some sentences. So this is also something that I'm prepared for, before the lesson. And just to make sure, at the very end, when I have already planned my lesson, I check if my aims have been fulfilled. Because eventually, after all, that's why we do what we do. Okay, so I always double check if I didn't by accident go too crazy with activities and maybe I've forgotten about aims. I haven't. All right, so I've done everything. My students can use imperatives and so on. And one last thing that I want to mention before we finish, which is going to be very soon, and I'm very upset about that, but I believe we're all also there's so much here, so maybe you're also a little bit tired. Timing. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the previous slides, you could see this clock with numbers, and this is the timing of my lesson. And I did not mention that on purpose. That was done on purpose because I'd like to discuss it now. Now, when it comes to the timing, how long do you think this activity would take you with your students in your class? So just if you could just write the number in the chat window in minutes. We talk minutes here. All right. So children do the actions for the story. 5 minutes, 7, 5. We also have 3, 7. All right. So most of the answers are somewhere between 3 minutes and 7 minutes. All right. So as you can see, different teachers, different groups, different students, different group sizes, therefore different timing. And that's why you plan it. And that's why it's not given in the teacher's book, because no one can really say. Sometimes some of you also say 10 minutes. It might take 10 minutes. With my group, it takes 3 minutes because they already know the activity and they work quite fast. But that gives me so much information because, if you know that it's going to take 10 minutes with your groups, then you just plan fewer activities in this lesson. And that's why planning timing is absolutely crucial. And that's one of the reasons I decided to pick one activity only in my free practice stage, because I know that I can't do both, because I know I don't have time for that, because I know that the activities I've done before are going to be more time consuming, and I'd rather have some time left at the end of my lesson than find myself in a situation in which I'm in the middle of the activity, and suddenly the lesson is over, and the lesson is not sort of wrapped up and it's not complete. So when I do have some time left at the very end of the lesson, then I can always use Game Bank, and I can always use one of my time fillers that I always have somewhere at hand prepared, and I don't panic. Right? Remember the beginning of the webinar? Panicking. We don't panic because we are prepared. And then, of course, in your in your unit planner, you can have a look at what has been done, what hasn't been done. You can see that in one lesson, I didn't manage to do some activities. So next time I'll plan just more time for it because I already know it's more time consuming. So to sum it up, as you remember, planning is extremely, extremely useful, and it simply makes our lives easier because we can set very clear aims, both short-term and long-term. We can manage our timing, and you see how important it is. You don't end up in the middle of the activity running out of time. You are prepared for everything. You don't end up with 5 minutes left not knowing what to do. You feel much more confident because you have everything under control. Nothing's going to surprise you, really. And the more experience you have, the more things happen to you. Therefore, the less likely you are to be surprised because everything that could have happened has already happened. You are more flexible. If you see that some activities take too much time, then you cross them out. You just get rid of them. And we're going to talk about it in one of the upcoming sessions. And it gives you this opportunity to be more flexible. You can trace your students' progress, but you can also see what's been done. You have You can see what works, what not, and just, put ticks and crosses so you know which activities not to repeat with a given class. You get immediate feedback from your students, which is connected to the previous point, and you have a physical, you have this physical trace of what has been done in case you need to show someone, what has been done with your students. Remember to check out your options and check resources. Remember to think big. Remember to plan ahead. And before I say my goodbyes, I just want to show you the handout that you're going to receive. There will be two different handouts. One is a lesson planner, and there are two versions of it. One is on one A4 page. One is spread on two A4 pages in case you prefer to print it out and, fill it in with your hand. Then you probably need some more space, but it's the same thing. And also there will be you will receive a sample unit planner, and same thing. So one is going to be empty on the A4 page. One is going to be spread into 2 pages, and also for each handout you will receive one sample filled plan. So you will see sample unit planner, like with my comments, and also sample lesson planner. You don't see it in the slide, but it is there. So from the very bottom of my heart, and also I believe on behalf of Macmillan Education, thank you very much. And it's been such a pleasure being here, and I really hope that you find these tricks, as I like to call them, useful. And I really hope that if you weren't sure if your lesson planning was effective or not, you are now convinced that it's something that can be very effective, save you a lot of time, a lot of stress, a lot of effort, and also help you prepare lessons better, right, for you and for your students, because you just have more control over it. So thank you very much. I am more than happy to have spoken here. Thank you very much for your ideas, and I really am looking forward to meeting you all, guys, in person, and I can't wait to say hi and in person, so hopefully sooner than later. Right, so thank you very much. And I think Grzegorz would like to probably say something, but the camera, the vision's still loading, but that's all right. And also, while we're still waiting for Grzegorz, maybe I'll mention some things that I haven't mentioned yet, because there's always so much more to say. Oh, I think Grzegorz disappeared. Well, okay, so maybe, guys, you have some questions. Maybe let's do it like that. Maybe you have some questions and you would like me to answer them. You can write them in the chat window, and I'd be happy to answer. I saw that some of you also said that you always plan your lessons, you always use the teacher's book, which is great. I encourage you to also be creative with it. I think the teacher's book is the best thing ever if you're a teacher, but I also think that we are also great teachers, and we also have some great ideas that are worth using. Okay. Yeah, Grzegorz is here, so...
Well, I thought I was here, Gosia, but I must have frozen. So anyway, thanks a lot for all the wonderful information. And without keeping you much longer, as we ran a little bit over time, I just want to say that we have been recording the whole of this wonderful session, so you will have access to a full recording in just a few days, as well as to the handouts that Gosia mentioned at the end, as well as your certificate for this session. So you don't have to do anything. You will simply get an email from us in a few days with all of this information. And if you liked the session today, then we do invite you to rejoin us on March 19th, which is where Gosia is going to do another installment of this series, and this one is going to be planning for reading development. So I hope that you will find this equally as useful, and if so, I hope I will see you all. Thank you very much for today, and goodbye.
Thank you.